Developing this morning, the Department of Homeland Security linking multiple Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota to an illegal Somali national arrested as part of the immigration crackdown there. Abdul Dahir Ibrahim entered the U.S. in 1995 after being deported from Canada, where he was charged with welfare and asylum fraud. He had been living in Minnesota despite an order by an immigration judge for his removal back in 2004 because of his extensive history of fraud charges. He was finally arrested by ICE agents last week. DHS did post these pictures online of Ibrahim with multiple Democrats they say have allowed him to keep living in the U.S. under sanctuary policies, including failed Minneapolis mayoral candidate Omar Fatah, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and Governor Tim Walz. At the same time, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is threatening to cut off funding to Minnesota over concerns of fraud in the state.
It's true. A Somali fraud ring in Minnesota stole over $1 billion from Medicaid. How did this happen? Well, Medicaid programs are run by the states, which in Minnesota means the Tim Walz administration. Governor Walz and the state's other Democrats rely on Somali votes to get elected, so they decided to look the other way because they were afraid of, quote-unquote, political backlash. Our message to Walz is clear. Either fix this in 60 days or start looking under your couch for spare change, because we are done footing the bill for your incompetence.
Governor Walz is also under investigation by the House Oversight Committee. Last week, Chair James Comer gave him a December 17th deadline to provide documents and records related to the investigation.
All right, family. So let's talk about this, man. Let's really talk about this, because we got to continue covering this whole Somali fraud scandal because people not understanding the scale of what's going on here. Like, this ain't just some little welfare scam. This is one of the biggest Democrat-linked frauds we ever seen in history. And I ain't saying that for shock value. I mean that, like, literally. And we're talking about the estimates up to $8 billion gone. Not saying, not thousands, I'm not saying that, look, it doesn't matter. It could be $1,000, but this ain't 1,000, right? This ain't 1,000,000. This is $1 billion. And you know what $8 billion could do in your community? That's fixing schools, feeding kids, building housing, wiping out medical debt. And instead of that money was stolen and sent to people who used to buy cars, used it to buy houses, take vacations, and some of it, brace yourself, ended up in the hands of terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab in Somalia. That's how deep this goes. But don't take my word for it. I want you guys to check out this next clip.
Streaming on CBS News Minnesota, Maria Lizignoli joins us now. Maria, fraud has been plaguing Minnesota recently, but now the governor is hoping to crack down on that crime.
That's right. Just this morning, Governor Tim Walz held a press conference on a new statewide fraud prevention program. Walz opened the conference saying this team is building on the work of the last several years and strengthening Minnesota's defenses against fraud. He made a promise that those who are caught committing fraud will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Governor Walz also introduced the team lead, Tim O'Malley, who will be serving as the Director of Program Integrity. O'Malley is currently the interim chief judge of the Court of Administrative Hearings and the former superintendent of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal.
Do you want to hear more from members and leaders from the Somali community to say, we need to look at ourselves, we need to hold our own neighbors accountable, because look at the damage that this has done to our community. What do you want to hear more from, instead of just saying, don't blame us? Do you want to see more ownership and oversight from within?
Look, it's not law-abiding citizens. If that were the case, there's a lot of white men should be holding a lot of white men accountable for the crimes that they have committed. I think for the community to maybe educate their population, because I think what you're seeing here is there's secondary victims in this, that there's providers inside the community that are then victimizing the community themselves by signing them up, because when we're going to some of these people, they're like, I had no idea I was in this program. So I think it's asking us then, for every crime, which of course the majority being committed by white men, asking us to do more about that. I think it's crime in general. And I think the biggest thing on this is just making sure that we're educating the population. And again, this is 80 people or so that have been convicted in this, maybe some more in that.
All right, family. So now let's break this down so nobody misses what we're talking about. All right. This whole thing was enabled by the fact that certain members of the Somalia community in Minnesota were getting welfare funds. Federal funds are taxpayer money, and there was no oversight. Now, think about this. If you run a business and someone on your payroll is stealing thousands of dollars and you just let it happen over and over again, guess what? You're either incompetent or complicit. That's the reality. And who's in charge of in Minnesota? Democrats, right? People like Tim Walz, who you see on the screen right here, Ilhan Omar, Keith Ellison, all of them had a responsibility to make sure that the money being sent into their communities was being spent the right way. But guess what? There was no meaningful oversight, none. The money came in and nobody tracked where it went. Now, some people might say, oh, well, how could they have known? Bro, this wasn't hitting. This wasn't slick. People were buying luxury cars, booking 5-star vacations, throwing up pictures on social media like they just made it out the trenches. But with money meant for hungry kids, housing support, and healthcare. This was money meant for survival, not splurging. And let me ask you this. If you apply for welfare and told them you spent the money on a Bentley, what you would think would happen to you? They'll shut it down instantly. But in Minnesota, this ran unchecked for years. I mean, years, man. So, I want to show you guys something else, right? With the evidence from Fox News.
Today, addressing an evolving fraud scandal in his state, as new documents show just how scammers spent millions of dollars that was intended for hungry kids. What did they spend it on? Private villas, champagne, outdoor hot tubs, plunge pools, and more. Correspondent Alexis McAdams reports live from New York City with more. Wow, this is just disgusting to the max.
It is disgusting, and it's also money that was stolen from taxpayers. So most of the people you talk to, John, I don't know if you've ever been, but I've never been to the Maldives. I'd like to go, but that's exactly where prosecutors say a group of Somali immigrants were taking your tax dollars and spending it there on the life of luxury. They were flying around the world, buying cars, champagne, you name it, and it was all on your dime. So this is who we're talking about. This is Abdimajad Mohammed Nur. He's going to spend the next 10 years in federal prison after investigators say he, who was living in Minnesota, took part in a $48 million COVID-19 pandemic. This was a meal fraud scam. So they spent hundreds of millions of dollars that were meant to feed hungry American kids. Those kids didn't get the meals that this was meant for. Prosecutors say stacks of cash that you're looking at like this were just blown on luxury cars for waterfront properties out in Minnesota, some nice cars, and then this private villa in the Maldives. Prosecutors were showing these video clips in court, John, of the fraudsters popping champagne bottles during their luxury getaway. You can see it's decorated for, I guess, a honeymoon. Investigators say the men were happy to be cashing in. They were texting each other, "You're going to be the richest 25-year-old, saying God willing. What is being called the largest fraud scheme in history? It happened on Minnesota Governor Tim Walz' watch, and today, the Democrat who did run for vice president launched a fraud prevention program. Might be a little late. The White House says he failed his state and his country.
Donald Trump brought this to the attention like this is something brand new. This is not brand new, and it's been being worked on, but he made it white hot and very dangerous.
And it doesn't stop there. The defendants like this.
Bro, take accountability, bro. How ignorant you sound. Donald Trump is, see, this is where the Trump derangement syndrome come in. Donald Trump is acting like this is something brand new. This is something not brand new. But Donald Trump made it white hot because he brought attention to this. Okay, well, he wouldn't have brought attention to the matter if you did your job. Number two, listen to how ignorant you sound and how foolish. You should be ashamed of yourself, Governor Tim Walz. Just step down, bro. Talking about this is something not brand new. Why is this something that is a normalcy in the first place? And the simple fact of using something in regards of kids, who are innocent, using the sentiment of kids and children that you say you are helping, right? Feeding hungry children, right? Under this nonprofit called Feed the Hungry, right? Or it's called Feed the Hunger. And you mean to tell me you guys use the vulnerability of kids to enrich yourselves, and you're acting like, oh, this is not something new. Oh, so you just told on yourself. Since it's not something new, then I mean, if it's something that has been going on for years, then you the one that were complicit of it and you let it go unchecked for years, like I said in my statement before I played this clip, right? Because it's mind blowing to me how comfortable he's so able to double down on his ignorance and incompetence as a governor. And this is the leadership that Americans should be um paying for and funding and supporting and backing as a public servant. This is disrespectful to Minnesotans. Seriously. If you have a nonprofit called Feed the Hunger and it's supposed to be for kids, but it's not going to kids. This is the common play of use kids to tug on the heartstrings of individuals. So they see nothing of it because it's just kids. They're so innocent. They're helping kids. What can be wrong? So individuals don't really look directly into it or say anything because it's kids, right? And part of the Feeding the Hunger program is part of the selective group of minorities, depending on the stipulations of how this Feeding the Hunger nonprofit program is supposed to go. They may help kids they may help kids who parents are in a certain income margin where they qualify to be fed the hunger. So what I'm saying is, with stipulations put in place and all the red tape and people just looking at it like, oh my goodness, they're helping children and so busy happy about the help, but really, is it really help if none of the help was taking place in the first place? So nobody, the American people aren't going to think of it because we're just happy that it's going to a good cause, supposedly, but it wasn't the whole time. That is disrespectful. And to him to sit there and say, oh, Donald Trump is acting, for him to say this right here,
On, but he made it white the attention like this is something brand new. This is not
that's just spit in Minnesotians' face. Comment down below if you agree with me. This is not something brand new. You should be ashamed of yourself, sir.
not brand new, and it's been being worked on, but he made it white hot and very dangerous.
And it doesn't stop there. The defendants like this guy, Abdizadaz Shafil Farah, sent millions of stolen American tax dollars overseas. They wired it to Chinese and Kenyan banks. So this is a wild story. It's far from over, John. The U.S. Treasury Department is investigating now if this money went to fund the Al-Shabaab militant group in Somalia. It's really crazy.
I mean, considering all the things that it went to, it wouldn't surprise me if it went to Al-Shabaab as well. Alexis, thanks for the update. Wow, that's really incredible. Thanks. Jackie?
Well, there you have it, folks. There you have it. That is wild to me. So now, because of all this, Tim Walz is facing defunding. That means the federal government might cut off the money they usually send to Minnesota because the leadership can't be trusted to manage it. That's a big deal because think about it. It's like your mom give you lunch money every day as a kid, right? One day she finds you been using it to buy vapes and scratch offs and, not lunch. Guess what? She cutting you off. That's what the feds are threatening to do with Minnesota. And here's what makes it even worse. This ain't just happening in Minnesota. Blue states across the board are doing the same thing. They don't want to hand over data who's receiving food stamps. And the reason is simple. It's very simple. They're giving benefits to people who aren't even supposed to be here, illegals. And if they weren't doing that, they'll have no problem being transparent. Not to only mention, they're not just giving it to illegals to create a whole new voter base. They are giving it to individuals in certain minority groups because the illegal part is just the icing on the cake. But to really get to the batter of the cake, the whole base of the cake, is to create a voter base that keeps the Democrats in control. And the way they incentivize, or I should say persuade, for those to stay dedicated voters to the Democrat Party is give them something free. If all else fails, give individuals something free. They'll shut up and bow down, and they'll submit to your authority, which then in translation leads to their vote to keep Democrats in control. If you want to gain a vote, give something free. And look, The numbers show us, right? When it comes to the illegals. Now, we can't see the numbers when it comes to the benefits that are being spent because the blue states don't want to give over their data. And they have a problem being transparent because they have something to hide. But the moment the federal government says, hey, show us the numbers, they fold. Why? Because they're guilty, right? If they get that funding cut off, because you got to follow the money. You get where I'm going, family? And if you end up cutting off the faucet, people are going to start getting desperate. And desperation leads to individuals start scrambling and scraping. So now they're going to want to be transparent. If they weren't doing nothing wrong, then there'll be no problem being transparent. It's as simple as that. So now what happens is they get threatened with defunding too, and now it's not just about food stamps. It's about Medicaid, Medicare, and all types of federal assistance programs that these states have been mismanagement and letting people exploit. Because now we got to go down this whole rabbit hole following where the money is. And the truth is these Democrat-run states are seeing their incompetence get exposed on the national stage. And it's out there now. You can't hide it. And Tim Walz, he's in full-blown panic mode because he's feeling the heat, and you can tell. So he runs out and tries to save face by holding a press conference talking about, we're launching a fraud prevention task force. Oh, now you want to act like you care. Bro, you had years to do this. Then you just say, oh, Donald Trump acting like this haven't been going on for years. This ain't nothing new. But why now have a fraud prevention task force if this wasn't something new? Why the program wasn't something new, let alone the things that you allow to happen for so many years? Because if you really had a fraud prevention task force that wasn't new, which is brand new because you just got caught, then it would have been meaningful oversight, and you would have had to have an explanation in regards of really showing how effective your leadership is. But it's not. That's why you're sitting here making a fraud prevention. You're making a fraud prevention task force now because you got caught. The public caught you slipping. That's not leadership. That's just desperation. So now you want to hurry up and act like you care. And here's where it gets straight up clown world, because at the press conference, you heard them, you guys. A reporter asked Tim Walz a very fair question. Do you think there needs to be accountability with the Somali community? And this man turns around and starts talking about white men committing crimes. Like, bro, what are you talking about? What does that have to do with anything? This ain't about race. This is about a Pacific fraud case with Pacific people under your Pacific watch that you are biased towards. And instead of answering the question, you throw out this random deflection to change the topic. That's weak. That's not taking responsibility. That's trying to dodge the truth by bringing up irrelevant stuff. And the deeper you go, the worse it gets. Now, evidence is coming out showing how the money was spent. Not just the cars and the clothes, but we talking about extravagant vacations, private villas, houses, champagne, hot tubs, all types of wild stuff. And again, this was taxpayer money. Your money. Watching this right now. And if you got this far in the video, give this video a big thumbs up. Come subscribe and join the family. But in Tim Walz, he's still fumbling to explain how it all happened while he was in charge. And I'm going to keep it a buck with you. None of this would be happening if they didn't get caught. Democrats don't care until they get exposed. That's just the pattern. Tim Walz is only doing something now because Trump brought attention to it. That's the part people need to understand. Trump pointed a light at the rats, and now they're scattering, and he forced Tim Walz to jump. He forced him to do his job. And honestly, Trump been making a whole lot of these Democrats governors do their job and do the work they should have been doing as a public servant and as a public official to the public who voted them in office. And Donald Trump is just holding them accountable in public. So now we got to talk about Tom Emmer, a Republican from Minnesota. Check it out.
What looks like gridlock in the Senate, the battle over health care in the House is heating up.
11 House Republicans signing a discharge petition to force a vote on a one-year extension of the supersized subsidies. For more, let's bring in House Majority Whip and Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer. Congressman Emmer, so grateful for your time this evening. I want to pick up there on this discharge petition because it seems like there's not enough support to really bring that to a vote. But I understand there's also reporting that the House GOP is preparing to introduce another package, another proposal. So I'm wondering if you can tell us about that proposal that is forthcoming in the next couple of days, it sounds, and whether that would include what these other GOP members want, which is an extension.
Lydia, Brian, great to be with you. First off, yes, we're working on different issues, but Republicans actually do want to address the problem. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they just want this as a political issue, a political football for campaign purposes. The discharge petitions you're talking about, for me, those are more a message from different members that something has to happen. These enhanced tax credits are only going to impact 7% of Americans. It's like 21 million people, but 300 million people are going to see almost 20% increases. And by the way, the dirty little secret is, even for those that small 7%, it will only affect about 4% of their 20% increase. The real issue that everybody needs to be talking about and attacking is the Unaffordable Care Act. When it was passed 15 years ago, Americans will remember you were told you can keep your doctor, you'll have more choice, and your premiums will go down. Well, guess what? Just the opposite happened, and we've got to start bringing in the health insurance industry, because it's not about health care. It's about the health insurance industry that has gotten fat and wealthy over the last 15 years, while Americans have found it harder and harder to pay for the health insurance to give them access to health care. And you watch. Jamie Comer, you talk about the discharge petitions, but Jamie Comer and the Oversight Committee are going to start calling these executives before their committee and exploring why it is that insurance companies just keep getting richer and richer while Americans keep getting less and less.
Okay, so I'm totally with you on the broken economics. I think you nailed that. But my concern with this, and maybe the discharge petition is just kind of messaging to say, let's do something. But my concern is you got a lot of Republicans with a pretty healthy appetite for extending these supersized subsidies. And to me, knowing how government works, you do it for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, it's like doing it forever, because you come back to it again and everybody says we got the same crisis. Do you think we'll get away from that, Congressman?
Well, I think what you're seeing is without a message for the American people, and the message needs to be the focus on these health insurance companies. My goodness, my wife and I just got our premium increase. It's another $1,000. You can't do this. I can't imagine. Everybody is fighting this all across the country, and throwing more money at the insurance companies for 7% of Americans when 300 million Americans are actually being affected is not necessarily the right answer. But those people that are doing this, they don't see another option. So what they're talking about is, let's extend them for a certain period of time and fix the real problem, which is let's find out why it is the health insurance companies are the ones that are making all the money, while Americans are finding it harder and harder to afford the insurance products that would give them access to the greatest health care in the world.
Congressman, I want to ask you about your great state and Brian's great state of Minnesota.
Fellow Minnesotan here, sir. We got some problems to sort out, don't we? Go ahead.
I want to ask you about these troubling reports about the fraud that's been uncovered there under Governor Tim Walz's watch. I understand that it's one of the largest, or if not the largest, instance of COVID fraud that's been uncovered to date. And the proposal there at the state level to fix this is another kind of oversight group that will just tax Minnesotans even more. Your thoughts on kind of getting down to the root cause of the fraud, and how are you going to hold Governor Walz accountable for this?
Well, two really big questions. First, the root cause of the fraud would be Tim Walz and Keith Ellison. Before Keith Ellison, there was a Democrat Attorney General named Lori Swanson that was actually investigating and prosecuting Somali daycare fraud. Lori Swanson ran for the Democrat nomination to run for governor in 2018 against who? Tim Walz. At the same time, Keith Ellison was running for her spot in the Attorney General's office. Well, after Walz and Ellison won, Ellison made a pronouncement in his office, I'm told, that there would be no more investigations without his express approval. And what apparently they've allowed to happen is they have allowed this fraud to occur. And by the way, I want to make a point, because I was about to say the Somali community. Not all Somalis are criminals. It just so happens that, for instance, out of the 87 people charged in the largest pandemic fraud case, the Feeding Our Future, 250 million, 90% of them were from the Somali community. The 80 centers, the autism centers that are being investigated right now, there's one Somali woman who built $14 million out of a Medicaid program by recruiting other Somalis to put their children in the autism clinics. I mean, based on the numbers, 1 out of 16 Somali 4-year-olds allegedly is autistic. That is more than 3 times the state average. Oz has identified major Medicaid fraud. I mean, if you look back just a few years ago, it was about $3 billion or 3 million under that program, I believe, that involved the autism centers. Guess what? It's grown to 400 million. They had a Medicaid housing program that they started in 2020. They estimated it was going to cost about $2 million a year. Guess what? Over the first 4 years, they built $100 million out of that program, and they shut it down in October this year because of the fraud, and they'd already sucked out another 61 million. So your second question, if the whistleblowers that are coming forward are real, and if they can document what they are claiming, which is that they told Tim Walz about the fraud, and he not only ignored them, but he retaliated against him, there's criminal activity here that needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent. Okay.
Shout out to Tom Emmer. Shout out to Tom Emmer. This hit home for me because, you know, I have a little one that is autistic. I have a son. And the simple fact is the spectrum is so big. But the bigger part of it is the simple fact that they're playing on the sentiment of kids talking about feeding our future, but they're not actually feeding the kids. And then you have these autism centers. And look, this is the dangers of you basically using the innocence of individuals who may have developmental delays, because you know they may have a speech delay that can be under that umbrella of a developmental delay. They may have a occupational, they might have a cognitive delay, you know, where they may process a little bit slower. They need more time, and it's just overall playing with kids with disabilities. And within that, kids with disabilities, when they're in school systems, they tend to get paid more because the school systems are getting paid more to justify making sure they have effective, adequate help and making sure they are meeting the standard and above the standard to make sure they're helping that child in a school setting, because it's not effective if the child is autistic and they don't have the educational setting, let alone the educational environment that suits that child's need based on that district. And if that district doesn't have it, they may have to pay for the child. That school district that they're in may have to pay for the child outside of the district, because within the district and where the child may live with the parent may not have the adequate resources. But they get more monies is what I'm saying. And the simple fact is, for you, in this case, Minnesotans, to play off of the innocence of not helping children with delays and children that are hungry, that is the most shameful thing you can do. The Democrat Party is so big on human rights. Well, autistic kid, this is how autistic kids are on the spectrum can be overlooked. They're not getting the money. The money's being splurged and being exhausted, and they're not getting the resources needed. So where's the resources? Where's the money going to enriching yourself? So that means the resources are being exhausted that actually should go to the kids on the spectrum, or doing more research to help make sure that they have adequate data to effectively help kids on the spectrum. The spectrum is so big, family, because you can have a kid that have multiple disabilities going on, more than one. They can be autistic, yeah, but then they can have a cognitive impairment. They can have a speech delay. They may have hearing issues. They may have a their attention span. You know what I'm saying? They may have it can be so much, is what I'm saying. And also, you're not only abusing taxpayer dollars, but you're taking away from kids that you're supposedly supposed to help. And you wonder why school districts don't have the funds, and parents fight so hard. And it's not easy. when you have a child on the spectrum, because you want to make sure they're not overlooked. You want to make sure the data is correct. You want to make sure, they're being tested effectively. You want to make sure they're in the right setting, educational wise, academically, so they can go up and actually grow and actually overcome, because they can overcome. And just because you're autistic, that's not a label. You're human just like anybody else, right? It could be a kid with that's not on the spectrum, that doesn't have ADHD or anything like that, but they just may process different. They may receive information different. Some kids work better self-study, right? We have colleges where they're online, competency based schooling, where you basically pass the test, you can move on to the next class. And then you have traditional schooling, where you, within expand of 4 years, spread it out. You have discussions, papers, assignments, exams, and quizzes throughout the span of spread it out for schooling, whether that's in person. They have also traditional online schooling. So what I'm getting to, family, is kids can be overlooked because they don't have the adequate resources. Parents may fight so hard, but then they also, want to make sure their child has the resources and the monies. And, it's not fair to anybody, to be honest. Autism kids, since that's who they're specifically talking about with the autism research, and, just Minnesotans in general. So, Tom Emmer, I got to give, because he broke it down clean. Everything happening right now, that's what the Department of Justice oversight was meant to fix. That's why Democrats are out here complaining and screaming about how mean and racist it was. And they didn't want any of this to get uncovered. They didn't want people looking under the hood. Get your hands off of my Medicaid. Get your hands off of Social Security. Nah, what you're really saying is don't mess with our money pipeline. Because once the feds start looking into where the money goes, they start finding fraud, kickbacks, corruption, and politicians looking the other way, like Stevie Wonder. No disrespect to Stevie Wonder, just metaphorical, But they acting like they're blind, which is ignorance, when they're really not. But just as the games they like to play, you see they like to play with the vulnerability of kids, should be ashamed of themselves, sickening. But they didn't want the public to see it. And now the money train got derailed, and that's what this is. The party is over. And it all comes full circle, because these are the same people that told us that this was a conspiracy theory. Ain't no fraud. Y'all just hating. Nah. Turns out this was a massive billion-dollar scheme operating under the nose of someone who was on a presidential ticket with Kamala Harris, and someone who was supposed to be running the entire country. So yeah, this ain't small. This is huge. And now the truth out, the receipts are out, and the same folks who scream conspiracy theory are now standing in the middle of the biggest welfare fraud scandal in modern U.S. history. Let that sink in. You fund it, they steal it, they cover it up, and only when they get caught, they try to fix it. But anyway, family, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Hope you guys got some value from this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate. Love you guys and appreciate you for rocking with me. Catch you in the next one. Peace.